Duncan Wood is director of the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute, and he joins us to discuss a serious topic, the missing students in Mexico. It's now about 2 months since the arrest and disappearance. Unrest growing. I have a quote here from Felipe de la Cruz, a father of one of the students who's become a spokesperson for the group. He says, "The flame of insurgency has been lit." Sounds pretty serious. How deep is this crisis?
So those are very strong words, and I think that if you see some of the images that are coming out of Mexico right now, you'd be tempted to believe that certainly it's moving towards there, but we have to really pull back. And this is one of the things that is incumbent upon us as analysts at the Wilson Center to really take that broader perspective. So certainly this is a deep political crisis for the president. Both the problem of civil security or insecurity in Mexico, and most importantly at this point in time, the failure on the part of the government to provide an adequate response to this particular tragedy. What we've seen is that the federal government has launched an investigation. They've found remains of the students. They believe it's them, but the remains are so deteriorated, they were burned heavily, that they can't actually make a positive identification of many of them at this point in time. But on top of all of that reaction, you've seen various crises impacting the government to do with corruption, accusations of corruption on the part of the president's wife, who has a house which was, she has either bought or has been given to her by a company which is connected to another company, a Chinese company, who bid successfully on a contract, on a rail contract in Mexico. The Mexican government is trying to clear up all of the confusion over this at this point in time. Last night, the president's wife went on television to issue a statement trying to clarify the details of this. But Mexicans feel very unhappy about this, and it's more than just a reaction against this government. It's a reaction against long-term, long-term dissatisfaction with the way the Mexican governments respond.
All of these complexities that you described just fuel conspiracy theories. I've heard some theories that these students couldn't possibly have been burned because it was raining that night.
Yes.
So it's going to be very difficult to untangle this. You said failure of the government. Does that failure begin and end with the president? Is this the buck stops here type of scenario? Is this a failure from the top down?
I think that we have to say that there have been problems, certainly in communication from the top down. I would actually pin the blame much more firmly on the advisors who are telling the president what he should be doing and how he should be reacting in this situation. Clearly what Mexican society is demanding at this point in time is a more comprehensive approach to the problems of corruption, insecurity, lack of transparency in government processes. And what they really want to hear is a recognition on the part of the government that there are major problems, but that the government has a plan, or at least is putting together a plan to attack these problems. And the reason why this is so important, and I mention it, it may be what we'd expect from any society, but 20 years ago, Mexican society wouldn't have been so demanding. Now it is. And part of the reason for that is that Mexico's gone through a rather dramatic process of democratization. We have social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., that are bringing forth all kinds of theories, conspiracy theories, but also information that Mexicans can react to. And I think what the government in Mexico now needs to do is to really address those deep concerns on the part of the Mexican public. Because if they don't, this crisis, this political crisis, will only get worse.
In trying to get a grip on that 30,000-foot view, the larger picture that you described earlier, we've had claims clearly before this event that security was improving, and some say it still is. And yet we see there are still more than 20,000 Mexicans listed as officially missing. Where does the truth lie in these two seemingly contradictory pictures of what's happening?
Well, reality is complex, obviously. So we have seen declining numbers in terms of homicides. Mexico has improved dramatically over the past few years. Had a homicide rate of 22 per 100,000 a few years ago. Now it's down to 19. Still unacceptably high, and the government recognizes that. But some advances have been made on that. Certainly in terms of arresting or eliminating some of the top figures in the drug cartels and organized crime, the government's achieved significant success in that, which has led to a disruption of their activities. What we haven't seen, however, is any real success in lowering the rate of kidnappings and extortions, which have gone up in Mexico over the past few years. And we haven't seen any real progress in the past couple of years on real institutional strengthening in Mexico at the local and state level. And this is one of the biggest problems in Mexico, which is that we've had a process of decentralization. Power has been devolved from the federal government to the states and the municipalities without any subsequent or consequent increase in accountability and transparency. So those levels of government have a lot more resources than they used to, but they're less accountable than they were before. This means that you really cannot control them in the way that you used to. And this is what I think the Mexican people are really crying out for. One of their major demands is to make sure that these corrupt and decaying institutions at the local and state level are dealt with by the government.
Well, this is certainly a story we'll revisit and stick with. But on the case of the students, a final question for today. What will it take to resolve this crisis? Is it about arrests and convictions? What will it take?
I think that the government is doing a lot of things right in this case, which is that they're seeking international help on identifying the remains. A forensic laboratory in Austria, for example. That kind of international seal of approval on the results of the investigation will be very, very important in convincing the government that these are the remains.
Antidote to those conspiracy theories.
Absolutely. But I think what we need to see is identifying who's responsible, making sure those people are arrested, some of them have been already, and making sure that the guilty parties are actually sent to prison. One of the enduring problems which comes up in Mexico is the level of impunity in the system. And the fact that, for example, if you commit a homicide in Mexico, you only have a 3% chance of going to jail. Now, that's something which the Mexican public are sick of, and they really want to see some progress on that.
Yeah. Well, Duncan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John.